Good afternoon to all from the editorial board of Build Up Portal. For the ones who are attending a Build Up webinar for the first time, welcome. For our returning audience, thank you for renovating your interest. Just a brief explanation of what is Build Up. Build Up is a collaborative platform in the field of energy efficiency in buildings. It is continuously updated and it represents one of the key sources of information on the topic of energy efficiency. You can register and become a member of the community, and you can also upload news, events, present a case study, results from a project, and so on. I would like to invite you all to navigate the portal. In the Learn section, you will find all the podcasts of the past webinars, so it is possible to listen to all the previous presentations. At the end of this webinar, the link to the full presentations and the file to the PDF presentation will be made available in this section of the portal. It is a pleasure to host today's webinar entitled Are Architects Ready for the Digitalization? DigiPLACE project, building up a digital framework for the architecture, engineering and construction sector, which is organized in collaboration with the H2020 DigiPLACE project. I would like to invite you all to contribute and participate in this webinar. You can ask questions by typing in the box on the right side of the screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation during the 15-minute Q&A session. Now I would like to present the agenda of today's webinar and introduce the speakers. The first presentation will be made by Alain Zarli and Alexis David from ECTP, who will discuss the state of the art of digitalization in the architecture, engineering and construction sector in Europe. Then Ralph Montag, BIM consultant from ArcDocs, will discuss the importance of the architect's involvement in the digitalization process. Then Larissa De Rosso from Architects Council of Europe will discuss about the architect's added value to DigiPLACE and further European research projects. Finally, Electra Papadaki from DigiGrow will give you the European policy perspective on the digitalization of the construction sector. Before leaving the floor to the first panelist, you are now going to watch a short video which introduces the project.
Introducing DigiPLACE, an EU-wide collaboration of 19 partners from 11 countries, representing the construction industry, academia and national governments, united in a single mission: to build the foundation for a digital collaborative future for the European construction industry. Europe's construction sector is unique and rich in history. It's given shape to our beautiful cultural heritage and provides millions of Europeans with a safe and extensive infrastructure and comfortable homes and workplaces. However, when it comes to digitalization, the construction sector has not reached its full potential yet. The sector's long and complex supply chain makes the implementation of innovation difficult. In spite of several promising national and European initiatives to boost digitalization, the complexities of the EU market have prevented cross-trade and cross-country synergies from taking place. That's where DigiPLACE comes in. As the shared platform for innovation, collaboration and mutual learning, DigiPLACE aims to provide a solid digital foundation that all European construction players can build upon. Our goal is to integrate digital construction technologies, applications and services, provide best practices and plan a roadmap for the future. What will digital construction look like? How can it energize your production and supply chain? How will it affect your work, market and consumers? A shift to digital can seem daunting. That's why we are building DigiPLACE jointly, brick by brick. All across Europe, digitalization is driving the productivity of industries and services, and construction cannot stay behind. Visit our website and get involved now. Let's build the digital future of the European construction industry together.
So now I leave the floor to Alain Zarli and Alexis David. Please, we can start the session.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me clear and well. So my name is Alain Zarli. I'm Secretary General of the European Construction Technology Platform. And with Alexi, who is our project officer, we are going to provide you with well, probably a too short snapshot of our current work, of our ongoing work in DigiPLACE, but hopefully with the intention of really ringing bells and sparkling lights in your minds in terms of future digitalization of the construction sector. So DigiPLACE, well, is about building up a digital framework for the AEC sector. What does that mean? Next slide, please. Next one. Roughly speaking, and well, you are all aware of that. We started, of course, digitalization of the construction sector, I would say 30 years ago, or maybe more than 30 years ago, with a flow of evolution from probably what was in the past, still probably 10 years ago, the normal way of doing in the construction sector, with document files, models that were totally, of course, disconnected. And we are moved also thanks to work that have been achieved in various industry initiatives, and in particular, for instance, Building Smart. We have moved toward this idea of having a common data environment that would, of course, group all the data, all the documents, and allow access to all those data and all those documents to any of the stakeholders in the construction value chain, I would say in a smooth and natural way. We are moving for sure toward this situation, but still there are, of course, quite a lot, and there are already quite a lot of digital platforms, but they are not all providing, you know, this full level of interoperability and smooth access to information that I would say the construction stakeholders are still dreaming of. So if we refer now in the next slide to the main intention or the main objective of the digital project, it is about creating in Europe, but of course, hopefully with the potential of influencing it worldwide, to create a reference architecture framework for the digital industry platform for the construction. So here maybe we have to be clear. DigiPLACE is about providing a set of guidelines and a kind of specification to what would be in the future this reference architecture framework. And it's not about developing, of course, one single digital industrial platform, because we all know that this wouldn't work, of course. There will be different platforms that will be developed, but if they hopefully are in the future DigiPLACE compliant, then we expect that they will have specific features that will answer the most advanced expectations from the construction stakeholders. And in particular, if we try to go for what we have defined as could be a kind of digital platform or reference architecture framework for those digital platforms, we can think about roughly speaking, we can think about an operating system that would allow us to enable and that would allow us to plug in services and to give access to data, and with the possibility to connect to other platforms in some way, or tools or applications via well-identified APIs. A little bit of a dream, just like, for instance, when you're using your smartphone, you are just downloading applet, or if you are creating some new application, you can put it in the store, and then, of course, everyone else can use it. So there's a little bit of this intention. And to achieve this reference architecture framework, next slide, please. It is important to notice, but this has been explained, of course, this has been presented in the video. that the DigiPLACE has really grouped quite a large bunch of stakeholders from the industry, including many associations, from the key RTOs in Europe, and including as well the industry players. The work program of the project has been, of course, to first start with digital level and comparative analysis, and that will be, of course, the main part of our presentation today, but also identifying the current challenges, barriers, and gaps, defining use case scenarios and the reference architecture framework, and then what could be a roadmap to deliver in the future, of course, various platforms and various demonstrators that will be compliant to this reference architecture framework, and that should, in that case, be able to interact and interoperate among others and give access, a seamless, transparent access to any kind of public or, of course, private data in the context of specific construction works and projects. So now I'll let the floor to Alexis to introduce you in a first step what has been this digital level and comparative analysis in the construction sector, but also other sectors, and also what have been the I would say the key lessons that we have extracted from this analysis and the success factor that we imagine for the reference architecture framework.
Yes, hello everyone. Does it work? Yeah. My name is Alexis David, working with Alain at ECTP, and as Alain was just saying, I'm going to provide just the first elements of how we have proceeded in order to assess this digital level of the implementation of the digitalization in the construction sector and in other sectors, and provide with first conclusions, first elements that we've had. So this work package 3 is composed, as you can see on the screen. It was a way to pave the way for the other activities that were going to be carried out within the project. We wanted to provide a global vision of this level of digitalization, to assess which technologies, digital technologies and tools existed, which one were used and how by the end users, to identify as well some first barriers and gaps, etc. So this work package 3 that I'm going to describe was divided in 3 main activities. The tasks, the task 3.1, for example, was assessing what was existing on this market and providing a first level of description. The second one, this task 3.2, wanted to analyze much more into details, into technical details, some of those platforms in order to extract some ways of implementing features, architectures, etc. in the reference architecture framework. And the third one, the task 3.3, aimed at providing success factors, so ways of implementing that into the reference architecture framework and recommendations that should be taken into account. So the idea was also to provide information for the other work packages of this project. On the right side, you see that we wanted to provide some context, identification of challenges, those success factors again that we're serving for other work packages, that we're going for the work package 4 to specify the gaps, the barriers, the challenges, etc. to digitalization in the construction sector, and work package 6 that was drafting that is going to draft the strategic roadmap that Alain was mentioning before. On the left side of the screen, you can see that we wanted to provide a certain number of contextualization information, and again, those use cases, limitation, success factors, first ideas of all of this that we're going to shape the work carried out in work package 5, which is going to define this reference architecture framework. So in the next slide, I'm going to briefly summarize what we have been doing in this work package 3, the main outputs. It's going to be, let's say, more a teaser of what we have done, and I would always refer to the deliverables that we have written in this frame and which you can consult online. So this first task, again, aimed at describing the level of implementation, the level of implementation of digital technologies and tools in the construction sector and to compare it with other industrial sectors. We have proceeded this way. First, we wanted to identify which digital platforms existed, platforms and tools, and to make a first characterization of them. So we have identified as well evaluation criteria, relatively simple in this first phase, provided a characterization. And in parallel, we have run a survey, an online survey that was targeting practitioners, so end users of those digital tools and platforms. And again, in parallel, we had some interviews with high-level stakeholders that provided another view of this level of digitalization in the sector. So first of all, this characterization of existing platform. All of us, all the partners of the project, we have been listing around 300 digital platforms that already exist on the market. Of course, it's only 300. There might be much more existing on the market, but that was already a good overview of what exists and what we have. We have been able to characterize around 200 of them, thanks to about 15 criteria we had defined. And maybe the most representative one is displayed here on the screen. We have proposed 15 categories of platforms that you see here below. And you can see that among the 200 we have analyzed that what we have called the collaborative platforms were the most represented. It's the 4 categories here on the left side of the diagram. Collaborative platforms that might be generic, so it can be applied to the whole value chain of the construction of a construction project, or that might be applied only to one part of this value chain. For example, the design phase, the actual construction phase, operation and maintenance, or demolition and renovation phase. So those were the most represented among what we were able to characterize. And some other kinds of platforms are much less represented, such as material reuse, IoT platforms, etc. Then I would like to mention some results of this online survey. So again, online survey that was targeting end users of those digital tools and platforms. We had around 200 answers around Europe. About 3/4 of them are from SMEs. And I would like to mention as well that a large majority of them were actually architects. So that might be of interest for you for the few results I am going to show here. Architects have been answering this survey. So there is, of course, a little bias there because architects might be more digitalized than other kind of companies in the construction sector. So we had an overview. Of course, it's only 200 answers, but we had an overview, a snapshot of what it is, what are the real practices in the real world, what people do, what tools they use, and what are their actual needs and barriers they are facing. You see here on the left side, this diagram shows that most of the people that answer the survey are digitalized. They are indeed using those tools, digital tools. And for those who don't, it can be for several reasons. Well, some of them don't see any added value in their work. Some of them don't have the time to train for using those tools because they might lack of competences. Sometimes it's too complicated, sometimes it's too costly. There are many different reasons for not using those digital tools. Another result we have from this survey is this diagram. It shows which kind of tools those people are using. And relatively clearly, you can see on the screen 2 bars, the gray one and the brown one, which respectively show people using BIM and digital 3D drawing and modeling tools. Again, there were many architects answering this survey, which explains the predominance of BIM and 3D drawing modeling tools. Sorry, I have an issue with my computer. Right. And also this survey enabled us to have a certain listing of added values and obstacles faced by the participants. I am not going to show the full list here because it was quite long, but we can summarize it in this table. In added values, we had around 11 reasons, 11 items concerning the project efficiency and management. So it might increase your workflow, it might increase your capacities to deal with data. Business and economic advantage, well, basically it might help increase your margins and so on. Services to the client, you will improve your services to the client. Data and technical aspects, well, you might increase your capacity of data management and also maybe respect more privacy and security aspect of the data. On the other side, some obstacles are still faced by the end users concerning the standardization, the interoperability of all those tools that exist on the market. Well, some technical features are sometimes difficult to handle. The question of cost, and again, this lack of knowledge that they might face. As I said, in parallel, we had discussions with stakeholders, with high-level experts in different countries across Europe, and it basically enabled to refine country by country this digitalization context and those added values and obstacles that you see on the screen, and to collect as well examples and good practices that exist across Europe. That was it for this first task of this work package I'm referring to. This second task aimed at precising, technically speaking, how those platforms and tools work, and to compare that with other industrial sectors in order to maybe extract some indications or some good ideas for the construction sector. We worked that way. Again, we selected a few digital platforms of interest, and we identified evaluation criteria, detailed one, in order to provide a detailed characterization of those platforms. We did the same approach with other industrial sectors, namely healthcare, agriculture, aerospace, and automotive. We compared that. And in parallel, we had, again, some interviews with people that answered the previous online survey, and again, with high-level experts in different countries. So we provided there a detailed technical analysis of those platforms to see how different features, functionalities, and so on are provided. That aimed at providing some ideas for the definition of the reference architecture framework that has been presented before, and to identify some implementation options that exist on the market and we might take some inspiration from. So we have analyzed those platforms displayed here. We had access to information for those platforms. Those persons are part of the consortium or part of the expert board of the project. And we did the same for 2 or 3 platforms for each of the 4 industrial sectors I mentioned before. The evaluation criteria were quite detailed. There were around 100 of them, divided in 4 different categories: the use case and services, so which features, functionalities are really proposed by the platform, what they're able to do; system functioning, how the platform works in terms of data management, architecture, standards, and so on; usability, what's the interaction between the user and the platform, how is it adapted to the users; and economic factors, well, the cost of the platforms, for example. So just a few main observations. This analysis enabled to have a good representative listing of what can be found in the market. Some general remarks that we can make on the construction platforms. The collaborative ones that I've mentioned before open a vast array of use case and services in different forms. And if it's not directly integrated, it's most often possible to access those services through APIs. However, there is a use of many formats, extensions, different linked service standards, etc., which leads to a certain lack of standardization and a low level of interoperability between software and services. There might be answers to that, for example, with the IFC standard. It's of course not the only one, but since it seems to be quite used across the sector, it might be an answer for the future. Some services in the construction sector are not really well answered, such as machine learning, requirement for documentations, project lifecycle management. Could take example for more advanced, to say so, sectors, such as the aerospace one that started its digitalization a few decades ago. And all this to say that also one key question we had in mind with the partners of the project was to provide our definition of what is a digital platform in the context of the DigiPLACE project, and we have reached it here thanks to the work carried on in this work package. And we define this definition like this. It would be an operating system that enables to plug in services and to give access to data with the possibility to connect to other platforms, tools, or applications via APIs. So that was what we've done in the second phase of the work. And the last one aimed at providing success factors. Those success factors are key ideas, key inputs that will enable to respect the objectives of the DigiPLACE project. We work this way. First, we identify altogether, the project partners and the expert board, we identify those success factors and define them. And then we assess how they are currently being addressed in the different platforms and tools existing in the construction sector and in the other industrial sectors I mentioned before. We compared that and wanted to extract a list of potential research and development orientations for the future development of the reference architecture framework. So I'm not going to list them, unfortunately, we don't have time today, but here are the 20 success factors that we have identified, defined, and assessed. For example, targeting interoperability and sustainability that I mentioned before, enable collaboration among the many stakeholders of a construction project, and so on. Sorry, my screen is blocked again. Yeah. What we have seen in this process is that many industries, actually all the industries we have studied here, share the same context in those ways. All of them need more cross-border and cross-sector cooperation. There is a large and increasing amount of data and more complex to deal with, so which is a reason for digitalization. New regulations appear every year that we need to comply with, and of course the need of standardization is high there in order to facilitate the cooperation projects. So there is this large impetus for digitalization across the different sectors, which all tend or have adopted or tend to adopt international standards, format, and APIs. However, there are some major differences in the comprehension of what should be a platform, what should be a cooperation platform. For instance, what we consider as an interconnected platform in DigiPLACE with an important role of public authorities and the regional or national levels. That is relevant in the context of construction and agriculture, which are fragmented ones, but maybe not in other markets such as aerospace and automotive, which are dominated by fewer and bigger stakeholders and services providers. So yeah, as a conclusion, those 20 success factors that you've seen before, if they are implemented in a structure, that would certainly help the construction sector to catch up on digitalization and to become more attractive. So for the future developments of the project, this task 3.3 enabled to expose a certain number of challenges, open questions, and different ways of implementing everything we would like to implement. And we have provided as well a list of R&D orientations for those success factors to be implemented, to be made. And all this will be taken from in the other work packages, in the future work packages of the DigiPLACE project, namely the work package 5 and 6. So the development of the DigiPLACE reference architecture framework and the associated strategic roadmap that Anna is going to precise later on. So that was it for an overview of what we have done so far in this work package 3. And again, this is only part of the activities that are carried out within the DigiPLACE project. I would just like to take time as well. As you have understood, we needed all the stakeholders of the construction sector to participate and to provide their input. This is why we have created a community of stakeholders, which is managed by our friends from Federconstruzioni, Luigi Perisic in particular. And I strongly invite you, if you're interested by all those topics covered in the DigiPLACE project, to subscribe to this community of stakeholders. It will enable you to be informed, of course, of what we do, to receive the deliverables that we publish, to be invited to the workshops, and also to provide you views and to participate in the definition of this reference architecture framework. So here you have the different links where you can register. You might take a picture of this QR code here, but anyway, you will receive those slides later on. So you can again click on the right links. So now I give the floor back to Alain.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexis. Well, I'm going to be quite short because I guess that we're running a little bit out of delay. So indeed, well, it's very important for us that you may join the DigiPLACE community of support, as we are currently finalizing the next steps of our project. Next slide, please. Which are fundamentally around this reference architecture framework that we introduced at the very beginning of the presentation. And we try to define it in, I would say, 3 main steps. The first one is indeed trying to analyze the various use cases, or the key use cases that help achieve core objectives that are obvious targets for the construction sector with respect to the decade to come. Then the reference architecture framework itself, which is to support the vision we introduce in terms of digital platforms, data access, and interoperability of data and platforms. And then the final work in DigiPLACE, which is supposed to end by May of next year, is how are we going to get there along the years to come, in terms, of course, of research and innovation efforts, in terms of pilots and demonstrators, in terms of potential deployment of new services. Next one, please. So once again, the reference architecture is indeed, or the intention is to be a delimited, deployable, evolving set of specification and guidance, which is to fundamentally rely on various principles. The key ones are on these slides: principle of commonly agreed minimal but sufficient interoperability and data privacy and security, the use of common standards at the baseline, and a generalized access to data spaces and digital infrastructures. And in particular, what is important for us is definitely what we have mentioned on the bottom of this slide. The idea that this reference architecture will provide with a kind of commonly agreed referential of tools and services that will support those key use cases that we are going to exhibit in DigiPLACE, and including a special focus on required public services and regulation. The member states are very, very interested in DigiPLACE. There are 6 member states, by the way, very active already in DigiPLACE, and some other which are following our work. Next one, please. So what we have done is that we have tried to, I would say, identify 5 main areas supported by 5 working groups that have been operating over 3 months, including during last summer, referring to, well, all those aspects of common language, interoperability standards, rules and regulations and public services, data and knowledge sharing, environmental performance, and also business, market, and collaboration. And for each of those 5 main areas, we have identified topics, and for each topic, various use cases. And just to give you an example of those topics, those potential topics, in the next slide, you can see that, for instance, well, we have identified a number of topics per area. For instance, just referring to rules and regulation and public services, we were thinking about those aspects of building permits, those aspects of access to construction rules, those aspects, of course, on environmental compliance, and so on and so forth. And those use cases are now under full definition, and that will be then submitted to the community of support in DigiPLACE, so that we can get feedback, and so hopefully we can get feedback from you as well. Next one, please. And I have to rush, I guess, because we are already 5 minutes late. Then we will have kind of a roadmap that will try to identify measurable actions with associated instruments to support a generalization, deployment, and use of this reference architecture framework. And well, I put 2027. It's a little bit kind of a reference, of course, to Horizon Europe, to the timeline of Horizon Europe. But well, indeed, the idea is to, of course, have at the same time, well, to nurture the establishment of a common market of digital platforms, and at the same time, of course, to create a sample European set of experimental projects and facilities to assess the rough set of specification. And last but not least, of course, which is very, very important, we expect to have a development, a large-scale development of expertise and skills related to platforms and services. Next one, please, and that will be my last slide indeed. We intend to have a three cornerstones approach around those key actions of promoting and networking, developing and deploying, experimenting and capitalizing. And this is something which is under development, as mentioned in the very last slide. So you can have a look at the timeline of the project. Next slide, please. And you will see that there will be for you an opportunity to very, very quickly react with respect to the use cases that we have been produced, with respect to draft and consolidated scenarios for the future implementation of DigiPLACE compliance digital platforms, and of course to have a view on the roadmap that we intend to achieve. Thank you very much. Sorry for having rushed a little bit at the end, and sorry for being a little bit late, but okay, that was, I guess, important that we introduced to all the aspects of the project. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm Ralph Montague. Thanks for inviting me to speak to you today about the importance of architects' involvement in the digitalization process. I'm speaking to you from the lovely city of Dublin in Ireland. I've shown you a picture there of our city, and the reason I'm showing this picture is to give this discussion some context, to say that when we talk about digitalization, we're talking about something very real, the built environment, something that's very important to everybody. So what you see in the picture, the roadways, the waterways, the buildings, the utility infrastructures that support every aspect of our society and everybody who lives in Dublin, who visits Dublin, you know, it's the built environment is where we live, it's where we work, it's where our children get educated, it's where we care for people, it's where we eat and drink and meet people, where we do our shopping, where we have entertainment. So almost every aspect of society and life is impacted by the built environment. And of course, how well that built environment performs has a direct impact on everybody in society. So I want to talk a little bit about the performance of the built environment and how digitalization is helping the performance. Because obviously we have some challenges in Ireland, and I'm sure you have similar challenges in other parts of Europe around the performance of the built environment in terms of productivity. So what we're finding is it's too slow to make and maintain the built environment. It's too costly. Even though we would consider ourselves a first world country in Ireland, we're struggling to meet the demand for housing, for schools, for hospitals, for infrastructure, etc. We also have sustainability challenges in terms of our built environment, which contributes almost 40% to the CO2 emissions. Challenges around the choice of building materials and building methods, a lot of waste in the construction process, and of course we have challenges around safety, the safety of people during the construction process, but also afterwards within this built environment. And all of these performance issues relate to information. So in order to make this built environment and to maintain and operate this built environment, we need information. and so the information has an impact on the performance. And unfortunately, as you look at this beautiful city, if I just click to the next slide. Okay. In some room of each of these buildings, there's a room like this with all the information about this building. Now, by law, every building is meant to have a building record of information which the owner of the building has to keep and maintain and make available to people. But what you see in this picture is what has happened in one particular building. At the end of construction, all the documents have been printed and put into files and boxes and handed over to the building owner in a sort of paper format. And it's very difficult, if you look at that information, to see how anybody would be able to work with that information to maintain and operate that facility. And the sad thing is that when you look at that picture, is hundreds of thousands of euros were spent producing that information, many man hours of time. A lot of digital tools were used. So we've been using digital tools in the construction sector for many years. But at the end of the day, all that useful digital data was printed off onto a piece of paper and handed over to the building owner. And so you can see within this picture a need to begin to organize and digitize the information in our sector, and some of the costs. So the impact of that information on design and construction is, according to the Boston Consulting Group, 13 to 20% cost to work with analog data versus digital data, and 10 to 17% every year in the operations. So that's an enormous cost to society. If you imagine, our construction sector in Ireland is about just over 20 billion per annum. So even if you take 10% of that, 2 billion euros each year is wasted because we're working with paper information or disorganized information rather than digital information. So I think the argument for digital versus paper is very easy for most people to understand. I think just about everybody listening to this call would operate a bank account, and either for your business or for personally. And you would have seen over the years how the financial industry has digitized. You can't imagine that there's people sitting with typewriters and typing out bank statements anymore. But of course, the way you receive your bank statement, if you receive it in a static printed format, it has limited use for you other than just to look at it and read it and keep it as record information. But if you received your bank statement as digital data, which is the way it's produced anyway, then you can begin to work with your bank statement. You can begin to filter the data, look at the data, edit the data if you need to quickly process and check the information. So I think most people looking at that would fully understand the enormous advantages that digitalization has had in the financial sector, and that's really what we're talking about for architects. I think most architects probably don't imagine that they're in the information communication business. Maybe they don't call it that, but that's exactly what architects do. The architects receive a lot of information, they process, assimilate, consider that information, they begin to conceive the built environment, and they record and inform other people who have to carry out the work. So the architects are working with information every day, and increasing amounts of information when you talk about all the various regulations and different material information, methods of construction, procurement strategies, etc. And then the technologies that architects use to communicate information to other people would vary from speech, writing, drawings, sketches, etc. And you can begin to look at those technologies and compare them, if you look at the analog versus digital technologies and the usefulness of those different technologies that architects use to inform other people. So some important points to consider for architects. I think the first one is to understand that architects aren't at the start of the information workflow process, and they're not at the end either. So they receive information from certain people and bodies, and they work with that information, and then they're also producing information that other people have to work with. So that tells us two things. One is architects have to see how they can influence the quality of the information they receive, because if they receive digital information rather than analog information, it allows the architects to be more productive and work with that information in better ways. And then they also need to see how they can influence the quality and the usefulness of the information that they produce and manage. So to understand that other people are going to use your information as an architect, and you need to produce it in a way that is useful to them. We always like to talk about the difference between good information and poor information, and the effect of the quality of information on the performance and outcomes of the built environment. So I would define good quality information as information that is correct, it's on time when you need it, it's easy to find, it's available, it's accessible, and it's in a format that is useful to work with. And the definition for me of poor quality information would be the exact opposite. So it's incorrect, it's late, it's difficult to find, it's unavailable, it's inaccessible, and it just slows down the way people work. It's in a static or bespoke format that people can't really use, or it makes it difficult to use. So it's very obvious that working with good quality information will make things quicker and cheaper and safer, and provide a better understanding to most people, and which will result in fewer mistakes. And it's also obvious that working with poor quality information is obviously slower, more expensive, more dangerous, and likely to cause more mistakes. So there's a direct relationship between the quality information and the outcomes and performance of the built environment. So digital versus analog formats of information, we briefly described earlier with the example of the bank statement, but analog information is typically slower to produce. It's difficult to update or use or keep up to date, and it tends to be more abstracted. So because it's so slow to produce, we tend to put less detailed information within analog information, whereas digital information is quicker to produce, it's easier to update and use, and it tends to be more realistic or more detailed when you're producing it, because you have the ability to produce more realistic and more detailed information in a quicker way. So there's a direct relationship between performance of information and whether it's digital or analog. And of course, we have to consider, particularly in Europe, the global trends in digitalization of all economic sectors. So in the same way that the financial sector has completely transformed itself in the way it operates from an analog world to a digital world, and you can look at the travel industry, you can look at the media industry, and all of the digitalization is happening. You can't stop it, and it's going to happen, and it is happening in the built environment. And of course, there's a drive through the World Economic Forum and the EU Commission have particular missions to drive digitalization, to improve productivity within the built environment sector, to improve the quality of the built environment, and of course to improve the sustainability of the built environment. So digitalization is being pushed quite hard through those organizations, and of course that's having an impact on the way the markets are working. And of course digitalization is also supporting new ways of working, so remote working, cross-border trade, open markets. It's making companies far more agile and resilient, which is particularly important at this point in time, with the COVID crisis. the companies that have able to work in a digital way have been less affected than companies that have not digitized. So how can architects support the digitization process? Of course, the first thing I would say is architects should embrace their role as information managers, to understand that they're in the information management business, and to take up that responsibility. The ISO 19650 standard places special duties on the lead appointed party for the management of information, and of course architects would typically take on that lead appointed role during the design process. I would encourage architects not to give away that responsibility and that agency. In other words, don't diminish your value as an architect, but really embrace your role in that regard. I would also encourage architects to take responsibility for the quality of information and outcomes on a project on both sides. So help your clients and employers to understand the importance of good information management and the effect that good quality information will have on the general outcomes of the project, and help the other participants and contributors to understand the importance of good information management. I will encourage architects to help inform and determine what digital information is required. So work through the professional bodies like the Architects Council of Europe, your national professional body, etc., to help the market understand and what is needed and how things could be improved. And in general, we do need to almost lobby the market to become better at producing and managing information through the various bodies. And by doing this, I think architects can have a very positive impact on the built environment and the challenges that I spoke about in the very beginning that we're having in the built environment, such as the economics. We can help to improve the productivity. We can make building quicker. We can produce less waste and make buildings cheaper. And we can also have an impact on the sustainability by doing more analysis through digital models and determining the performance of the built environment and looking at how we can better use materials and energy. We can also improve the quality of the built environment with compliance with standards. We can begin to digitize all those rooms with boxes of paper to take that paper from something that's very difficult to use or almost useless, and make it into something that's incredibly useful for the management of cities. And we can also begin to make improvements in the procurement process and the way projects work by reducing the amount of administration that is typically associated with lots of paperwork and reduce the delays, variations, and disputes that occur on projects. So I think architects have an incredibly important role to impact the way the built environment works. So I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
Hello, I will present you the architect's added value to DigiPLACE and other European research projects. Before I start, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Larissa de Rosso. I am an assistant project officer at the Architects Council of Europe. I am an architect with a master's degree in sustainable environmental design. I have been working with BIM projects since 2015. First, I will present an overview of the European architectural market. Then I will talk about the architect's added value in European funded projects. And finally, I will show some benefits you can take from European projects. In 2018, it was estimated that there were 562,000 architects in Europe. The map shows the number of architects per population. The highest number is represented in dark blue, while the lowest number in light blue. The country with the highest number of architects is Italy, with 2.6 architects per 1,000 population, while Bulgaria has the lowest number with 0.3 architects per 1,000 population. The average annual earnings for a full-time architect is 37,200 euros. The architects with higher earnings are based in the dark green countries, such as Denmark, Germany, and Austria. It is estimated that there are 134,000 private architectural practices in Europe. 71% of the practices have only one staff. Countries in light green, such as Germany, Austria, and Italy, have on average the smallest practices. Overall, in Europe, refurbishment accounts for 59% of the work in architectural practice. But there are big differences between countries. For instance, in Italy, 78% of all work is refurbishment. On the other hand, in Poland, 86% of all work is new buildings. Private housing is the most important sector in every country. In 16 out of 27 countries, it accounts for more than half of all work. Regarding the digital environment, 19% of practice have used BIM in the last 12 months, and they have used BIM on average 37% of the projects they have been working on. The data that I just present is part of ACE sector study. The study is updated every 2 years. In 2020 survey, new questions related to digitalization and post-occupancy evaluation were added. The survey will be open until the end of September, so if you would like to participate, please scan this QR code. If you are interested in more data about the sector or historical data from past surveys, please access aceobservatory.com. Now I will talk about the architect's added value in European funded projects. Before that, I would like to highlight that many activities developed by ACE are funded by Creative Europe. Among them is the sector study that I just presented, and activities more focused on digitalization in the sector, such as ACE Introduction to BIM, available at ACE website, and the 2017 BIM in Europe conference, available on ACE YouTube channel. ACE also participates in research and innovation projects that aims to support the sector development in many areas. In all projects, ACE adds value by providing technical support in the development of the project goals and therefore influence on the project outcomes to better fit the architect's needs. We also lead and/or contribute to the dissemination and communication of the projects. These projects aim to provide useful information to the architectural community and drive the sector towards innovation and improve the quality, energy efficient, and comfort in buildings throughout Europe. Most of all, the projects aim to increase the renovation rate of Europe, which is at the moment around 1 to 2%, which is not sufficient to reach the climate change targets. ACE is currently involved in 10 projects. I will briefly explain 6 of them, and later I will show the most useful outcome of these projects for architects. The first is DigiPLACE. As explained before, the project will develop a framework for European digital platform. The full result will be available by the end of the project in May 2021. The second is Hinosep. The project is developing a new modular facade system and a set of digital tools to assist in the design of the building renovation. Regarding BIM, ACE is involved in 2 projects. The first is BIM for EEB. The project partners are working on a BIM management system connected to 6 BIM tools to assist architects in the design renovation. The second is BIM Speed. The project has created an enhanced common data environment connected to a diverse range of BIM tools that will assist architects in the design of better energy performance buildings. The last two projects are related to education and sector upskilling. The first is BIM-Z. The project is developing a set of 12 online learning units on the topics of BIM and nearly zero energy buildings. The second is BIM-Implement. The project had developed national training programs for airtightness and ventilation using BIM as a learning tool. In this last part of my presentation, I will show you how you can benefit from European projects and how you can get involved. DigiPLACE project has a stakeholder community that you can actively contribute to the project's development. So, if you are interested in providing your input for the development of a framework for a European digital platform, please scan the QR code and register for the community. Hinosep partners are developing a plug-and-play facade system, as you can see on the two pictures on your bottom right. Hinosep partners are also developing a set of digital tools to assist the design of the building renovation using the facade system developed. In October, the project will make available some training videos for the use of these digital tools. So please, if you want to learn more about the tools and download the tools, you can access Hinosep website. In BIM for EEB, the project developed a BIM management system that provides an online platform in which architects can store and share information with other actors of the project. It will be possible to share 3D IFC model and easily visualize information in the model, and also use the set of 6 BIM tools that the project partners have just created. The test version of the platform is already available at BIM for EEB website. Now I would like to highlight 4 BIM tools in BIM for EEB projects that can be very useful for architects. The first is the Fast Mapping Toolkit. It is a pair of smart glasses and a sensor stick that facilitates the acquisition of information from existing buildings. The glasses assist the surveyor to collect information on hidden elements in the wall, such as studies and electrical systems. The second is the BIM Easier software. The software makes energy simulation and provides as an output comparison tables between different design options that can better inform the decision-making in early stages of the design. The third is a mobile application called BIM for Occupant. The application collects data such as temperature, humidity, and energy consumption and presents to the occupant in an easy-to-read way. This information can be useful for the architect's design proposal and also for the architect's post-occupancy evaluation after renovation. Finally, the fourth tool is the BIM Planner. This software assists the construction and renovation planning, facilitating the communication between architects and contractors. In BIM Speed, the partners are developing an enhanced common data environment, as you can see in the picture. This environment stores 3D models and offers also tools for project management, such as task management tool, an online meeting tool, a chat area, and add-on tools that can, for instance, assist in the design of energy efficient refurbishment or facilitate the data acquisition for existing buildings. BIM Speed is also interested to listen from the architectural community. Therefore, the project have created a community of practice. Every year in November, the project developments are presented and feedbacks are received from the community members. If you would like to participate, please access the project website and register for the community. I would also like to highlight the upcoming competition on the spring of 2021. It will be the EU BIM for Building Renovation competition. If you are interested, please subscribe to BIM Speed newsletter for more information. In this slide, I show you the 12 learning units from BIM Z, and I highlight the 9 learning units that are addressed to the architectural students and architects. These learning units present topics such as collaboration in BIM to achieve nearly zero energy building and BIM model standardization for energy zero building design. The e-learning platform is in tests now, and the full results will be available on October 2021. Last project, BIMplement, has just finished, and among all the results, the BIM library of constructive elements is the most useful tool for architects. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for inviting me to share with you updates from the Commission work regarding the digitalization of construction, hear more about the developments of DigiPLACE and the perspective of architects to this and other research projects. I am an architect myself and policy officer in DigiGrow of the European Commission, where I am responsible for the digitalization of the construction sector. The broad construction sector, including architectural and engineering activities, is of pivotal importance for our lives. The entire built environment, all human-made space we live and work, is a product of construction. At EU, but also at national levels, there are often dedicated policies for the construction sector. In the EU level, until this moment, this would be the Construction 2020 strategy. In parallel, the sector is found centrally in the industrial or SME policy, action plans and strategies for resource efficiency, digitalization and others, where the EU-level examples would be the Circular Economy Action Plan, the upcoming Horizon Europe, or the Digitizing the European Industry Initiative. If we can pass to the next slide, you can see also through numbers that the importance of constructions for the society, the economy and the employment become even more evident in the context of the economic recovery from the pandemic crisis. Our latest estimations based on Eurostat show that the construction ecosystem is producing about 9% of the European GDP, is composed by 3.1 million businesses, out of which 95% at least are SMEs. The high number of SMEs is particularly relevant also for the engineering and architectural subsector. Next slide, please. As all industries, construction is subject to the disruptive changes and opportunities of digitalization. And although it is considered and referred to very often as one of the least digitized sectors, it is transforming rapidly and by a very wide range of technologies. The Joint Research Center of the European Commission has done a very detailed analysis of the digitalization of the construction sector. And according to that, it has categorized basically the innovative technologies that are specifically applicable to the construction under these categories that you see on the right side: data acquisition, automating processes, digital information and analysis. These technologies drive the digital transformation of the sector, impacting and creating opportunities on energy efficiency, innovation, safety, security and cybersecurity, quality of construction, as well as various social impacts. Out of this plethora of technologies and tools, particularly in our radar are the technologies that you can see in the next slide. that are the following: digital building logbooks or passports, or as the previous speaker referred to, records of building data. Digital platforms, which due to DigiPLACE we are all very familiar with. Digital construction permits with automated checks, often BIM enabled. Building information modeling, of course, which is very often described also as the synonym of digitalization of the construction sector due to the disruption it brings in the ways of working and collaborating. And lastly, digital or digitally enabled technologies that are particularly specific for construction, such as robotics, 3D printing, or drones, with a lot of potential to increase in use and markets in the years to come. For this presentation, I will focus particularly on two such tools and technologies that you can see in the next slide, the digital building logbooks and the building information modeling, that are also the more mature work streams from the side of European policy regarding digitalization of construction, and hopefully relevant to an audience of architects. Next slide. To start speaking a bit about BIM. When we speak about BIM, often we ask if architects are ready, if construction companies are ready, how difficult it is to have a BIM manager or other specialized professions or professionals trained to more in detail, more into specific requests of digital construction. And indeed, the role of architects and engineers is quite instrumental, as they are among the ones to digitalize the construction process from the very beginning. Efforts to upskill, change ways of working, and optimize processes needs also to be understood and appreciated by clients, and specifically public clients that hold a very large share of the construction market. There comes the collaboration between the Commission and the European institutions in general with the European Group of Public Procurers for Construction Projects, the EU BIM Task Group, which is also very strongly associated with DigiPLACE. The EU BIM Task Group is at significant degree autonomous, with its own roadmap of action to showcase the benefits of BIM, to provide reliable information and guidelines to member states and procurers across the EU, to participate in standardization efforts, as well as knowledge sharing and support to national initiatives. If you can skip 2 slides. Certain of these actions have been developed or being developed and implemented in close collaboration with the Commission, such as the handbook for introduction of BIM in public procurement that you can see in the next slide, which is available in most of the EU languages. The handbook was published in 2017 and is the very first and basic effort and guidance to provide unified guidelines in order for public procurers to start implementing the Commission recommendation of 2014 of the Public Procurement Directive. Secondly, trainings to public procurers based on the handbook and a standardized training material that was developed. And in addition to that, from the side of a different Commission initiative, and always in the context of EU cooperation and alignment in the area of digital construction, the Commission has also given support in an ad hoc basis through the structural reform funds to member states that are willing to set up either national strategies for digital construction and BIM that can mean not only modernization of public procurement and upskilling of the public administration, but also updating in the curricula of their engineering schools and architectural schools, or reform of their permitting systems with BIM-based compliance check, or set up plans for standardization. So we have 5 projects that have been completed or about to start with the support of the structural reform funds in the area of digitalization of construction. And in the next slide, we have the latest and most recent initiative in the area of BIM, which is the effort to make the case for BIM in individual public projects by creating a model for conducting cost-benefit analysis by the public procureur and from their perspective. Until this moment, we know BIM is generally beneficial, but there is no easy way to prove how beneficial exactly can be in relation to the effort to be invested from the side of the public client. So through a service contract that we're starting this month and until May 2021, we will start working with research analysis and in the end a proposal for a model for the cost-benefit analysis. That will be the first step, which after will be tested by a team of architects and engineers that they will reconstruct 6 to 7 projects using BIM. And lastly, and based on the model and the case studies, we will have a short guidebook and training material for public procurers. The other area of Commission initiative that I wanted to speak to you about is the efforts to set up a common EU framework for digital building logbooks. So in the next slide, please. And one more. So first of all, it is already challenging to agree on the definition. What is a digital building logbook? That is also mentioned as digital building passport, or again, as it was mentioned very nicely from the previous speaker, a record in the end of building related information. It is a common repository for all relevant building data, information and documents that follows the building across its life cycle, like a person's health record, basically. It is aimed to facilitate transparency, trust, informed decision-making and information sharing within the construction sector, so potentially facilitating better collaboration across professionals, but also information sharing among building owners and occupants, financial institutions and public authorities. Lastly, it is, or it should be, a safe instrument enabling stakeholders to retain control of their data and who has access to them, recognizing that some of this data may need to be held confidentially. Data may be stored within the logbook or in a different location to which the logbook acts as a gateway. In the next slide, you can see that there are already many logbook-like initiatives in Europe and the world in general, with different scopes, levels of digitalization, covering different types of buildings, often infrastructure, managed by public or private actors, and lastly, being obligatory or not obligatory. In the next slide, you can see that defining the digital logbook, mapping the existing initiatives, identifying the gaps and proposing actions, as well as consulting with experts and stakeholders, has been part of an ongoing study that started in January 2020 and is to be finalized in the end of the year. Parts of it, and particularly the definition and the state of play, are about to be published very soon and within 2020 to facilitate a common understanding and discussion about digital building logbooks in EU level. In the next slide, you can see that already we have seen through, as I said, the analysis, the research, the interviews, that to facilitate the widespread of logbooks and the EU-wide alignment of initiatives, further support might be needed on research, innovation and development, standardization and legal matters of data sharing, linking of databases and providing of interfaces, sharing data and trainings. All of the above will be presented and discussed by our consortium in the 17th of November. There is a calendar in the next slide. So in the 17th of November, we will have a webinar open to all interested parties. So please save the date in case you are interested to participate. And regarding all other developments on digitalization of construction, the 3rd of December, we will hold our Construction 2020 meeting fully virtually to focus on digitalization. Given that this will be a date after the adoption of the renovation wave and potentially other Commission initiatives and programs will be in a more advanced stage than this time, we hope we can have a more in-depth exchange on all of this matter. So please save these 2 dates if you are interested, and I hope we will have the chance to discuss further about this and other initiatives and topics about the digitalization of construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we can start the Q&A with the first question, which is for Alexis. Open to everyone. So construction sector in the European Union is composed mostly by small and medium enterprises and family companies. Those small companies are subcontractors for big players. The big players have resources in the IT staff, but the small firms do not. Then don't you think the gap in knowledge skills between the working personnel between big versus small companies working on the same developing construction projects are making a difference?
Well, there is obviously a large difference between those two sizes of companies indeed. I think, well, that is something that has been clearly stated in different studies. I think what we want to mean here is also that, well, the large companies might have the power to bring with them the others, and also it goes all together probably with a better implementation of training programs that can help to cover this gap. Well, that's a reality, but there are probably ways to go around this this situation. I don't know if Alain, you want to add something to this question.
Yeah, yes, maybe very quickly. Training is of course mandatory and is necessary. I get that, for instance, looking at Electra's presentations, you can see that in the digital logbook current study, one of the 6 areas of investigations is dedicated to training, so that in the future, of course, in particular, building owners, building managers, contractors, and so on and so forth, will be able, of course, to deal with all the information contained in the digital logbook. But I would like maybe to add one point. The construction sector indeed is characterized by the fact that there are many SMEs which are working indeed in potentially many quite different construction projects. And one of the key issues right now is that from one project to the other, they also have in general to deal with different platforms, different systems, different tools, which I would say add one level of complexity indeed with this point. And DigiPLACE, of course, in its roadmap, will consider all the various aspects to be considered for developing digital platforms that are easily accessible to the SMEs, and also including, of course, the required training. But what is important is that we try to deliver in the future platforms and systems, platforms and applications that can be easily interconnected and that can be easily used by the end users, and in particular the SMEs, having in mind their needs and their requirements for this use of digital platforms, and having in mind a little bit the way you use, for instance, once again, taking this example, you weigh your smartphone or your laptops, now in a very easy way, without dealing with many technical aspects behind that have to be taken, that have to be managed, I would say, by the system itself. So the reference architecture framework of DigiPLACE really wants to lead to some specification that all the software vendors, the application developers can adhere to, so that this will use indeed the access to information as a whole. I'm not telling easy, yeah.
Could I make a comment as well? This is Ralph.
Sure.
Montague. Yeah. Just on that question, I think it's a really interesting question. I think the business models that the question asks about, the big players and the small players. What happens in reality is when the big players are subcontracting small amounts of work to the small players, often they're trying to get the cheapest price for that work and to reduce the service that the small player is going to provide. And so I think regulation is going to play a very important part, because regulation stops the big players, stops them reducing the service that they're pushing down to the subcontractors. So if it's a requirement under regulation that a service has to be provided, then that service can't be taken out of the subcontract to reduce the price. Whereas where there's no regulation, then all services that are that are not regulated will be taken out of the service, and the subcontractors are left with a very small amount of money to do a job, and then in that case they don't have the resources to provide a proper service. I think that's really important to remember. Things that are regulated tend to go well because they have to do it. They can't take it out of the subcontractor. But things that aren't regulated, tend to get dropped out of the service.
Thank you. I have a question for Ralph now. What requirements in regards to digital accessibility are required when sharing data or building digital products?
Well, I think that there's always been a requirement to share information for architects. So, I mean, you have to produce the design intent that other people have to work with, and the accessibility of that information is very important in the performance of how a project works. So if the information is accessible and available to people, then the project tends to go well. If the information is inaccessible or difficult to find or difficult to work with, then the project tends to not go so well. So I think the digitalization makes the information more accessible, than static or paper-based formats. I hope that was the question.
Thank you. Another question for Electra. The 5 focus areas are very practical and down to earth. How can advanced research and science get involved?
I'm sorry, the 5 focus areas of what?
I think those that you showed in the last slides. You can go down. You could go back to the slides probably.
Regarding the logbook.
I think so. It's not specified,
okay.
but I think so.
Yes, so the study, as I said, is still ongoing, but identified critical gaps in the adoption of logbooks that had to do with existing initiatives, but also what are the perceptions of experts and stakeholders. So based on these gaps, they have proposed, the consultants, our consortium, a series of actions that the Commission and the Member States could take. These are to be discussed, there are 10 shortlisted actions, and they are to be discussed in the webinar in the 17th of November. So for anyone interested, I really encourage you to join, so you will hear exactly how these action recommendations were extracted, and all the rationale behind it, and any stakeholder, any person in the audience will be able to give a feedback as well on the selection of these actions.
Yeah, it was referring to digital building logbook, digital platforms, digital permits, BIM, and construction-specific digital technologies.
So these are not actions. As you can see in the JRC analysis, there is a very long list of technologies that are used in construction. I have shown these 5 because these are the groups that we are really having ongoing work about for different reasons. When we speak about construction-specific digital technologies, it might fall into innovation, so funds on innovation and research, or support to SMEs because we have SMEs that do 3D printing. When we're speaking about building information modeling, it touches upon procurement. So digital platforms, as you saw, the first effort is DigiPLACE, that is a coordination and support action. So under different work stream and in different policies, and construction appears in different policies, as I said from the very beginning, in combination of constant consultation, studies, opinions and also scoping of the reality in the industry and academia, actions are developed, yes, as I said, on different programs and under different initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question for Larissa. Are you going to test the BIM tools?
Buildings. So each project, either both BIM for EEB and BIM Speed, they have demonstration buildings, and all the tools are going to be tested and validated before the final result of the projects. And all information you can find on their websites.
All right, thank you. So I close the session, and thank you to all our panelists and the participants to this webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.